This is Talk on the Wild Side. I'm Rob Smith, and there are few places in the whole canon of natural history that carry as much resonance as Downe Bank. It's just a small patch of chalky grassland, but it was frequented by none other than Charles Darwin for decades, and he loved it. And in his most famous work, Origin of Species, Darwin wrote, "It's interesting to contemplate a tangled bank, clothed with many plants of many kinds, with birds singing on the bushes, with various insects flitting about, and with worms crawling through the damp earth, and to reflect on these elaborately constructed forms, so different from each other and dependent on each other in so complex a manner, have all been produced by laws acting around us." Now that really is the central theme of his life's work, and just as important as the contemplation of finches and tortoises on the Galapagos Islands were to Darwin's work, so was the contemplation of this tangled bank, just a short walk from his home at Downe House, which these days is only a mile or so from Biggin Hill Airport. But it's such an important place that it's under consideration as a World Heritage Site. And it was actually the first nature reserve to be purchased by Kent Wildlife Trust back in 1962. It's home to literally dozens of rare and endangered species of orchids and butterflies in particular, and significantly, it's the place that David Attenborough chose to film the opening of his recent Planet Earth 3 series. And so it was a real joy for me in July of 2024 to get the chance to go for a ramble along Downe Bank with Paul Glanfield, who's the Nature Reserve Warden for the Sevenoaks area.
So yeah, we're on what was is now largely regarded to be Darwin's entangled orchis bank, which he refers to in the closing passages of the Origin of Species.
And I have to say, I mean, this is a real kind of bucket list moment to actually come. I've wanted to come to Downe Bank for years just to see what it's actually like, to get a kind of a feel for the place that Darwin would have wandered around and looked at. And this is, as far as we know, as close to being what he would have looked at as it can be, isn't it?
Yeah, so the vast majority of the species that we're going to see here today are still those that Darwin would have recorded when he was doing his studies on the site, including the vast majority of the orchid species are still here in good numbers. So yeah, it's a fantastic site for a whole range of wildlife, really.
Because it's one of those things that, you know, given the fact that where we are, Biggin Hill, Bromley, you know, right in close to London, so much has been concreted over. We're under flight past, we'll probably hear plenty of aircraft as they're going over, and yet this bit here has managed to stay intact. It's almost a miracle, really. Yeah,
we are literally stone throw distant from London. The site's designated as a triple SI, so it's a site of special scientific interest, so it's thankfully it's a very protected site. And the nice thing is, it's a really great habitat link as well. We've got the Downe Bank site here, but we've also got Bromley council sites next door, which we graze in partnership with them as well. So it's a really great habitat corridor heading further into the London boroughs as well.
And as we look around, what I can see are dozens and dozens of different flowers in the grass here, and hundreds of butterflies everywhere.
Yeah, it's a really good site. I mean, the orchid species that you're looking at here are common spots, pyramidals, there's lots of common twayblades as well, whole range of different wildflowers, and they're the larval food plants for a whole range of different butterfly species we get here. So early on in the season, we would have had the lots of red admirals and peacocks, brimstones on the site. Now we're coming through into slightly later season, we're seeing lots of more meadow browns today. If we're lucky, we'll see some gatekeepers and ringlets as well, and they'll all be, just flitting their way across the bank. So
I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. So the kinds of butterflies you're likely to see change from month to month, do they?
Yeah, so you'll have some of the early emerging butterflies in the early part of the spring. You'll have some of the later species coming on at this time of year. And then as we head later into July, we should start seeing species such as the dark green and silver bottle fritillaries that we get on the site as well. So yeah, it's quite seasonal. It's quite nice with butterflies. It gradually eases you into the monitoring season. They're quite handy from that point.
The monitoring season?
Yeah, it's our main monitoring season is any time between kind of March and October is kind of when a lot of the peak wildlife monitoring that takes place for particularly for the wildflowers and the butterfly species.
Okay, so what does monitoring involve?
So for this site, so we have we're very lucky here that we've got a team of volunteers that carry out butterfly transects. So that essentially they will walk the same route every week on a nice day, preferably, and they'll be walking at a standard speed, recording the number of species and also the number of butterflies that they see in any given area over a set time. So it's really useful data to us.
And most of the butterflies that we're seeing flitting around at the moment, they're sort of quite dark. I'm not very good at my spotting. So what species are they?
So the vast majority we're seeing here at the moment are meadow browns, which are one of the more common species. As I said, there's some of the other brown jobbies that you might see around here will be like the ringlets and the gatekeepers.
And that's just a matter of experience, is it?
It's a matter of experience. It's quite handy when they stay still, I have to say. So it almost does you a favour sometimes when it's a little bit more dull, a little bit overcast, even a little bit of breeze, and they tend to perch more instead of just flitting on the wing. And when they sit still, you actually get a decent look at them. You can see some of the identifying marks on them. So it's quite handy from that point of view.
And you've got your Kent Wildlife Trust branded gear on with the blue, the Adonis blue on it. Do you get those here?
Sadly, not one that we record here. So, but yeah, we do get it on one of my other sites, which is a new record as of last year, which is a fantastic result. So.
Okay. Which other site is that?
That's Downe Nature Reserve, so just outside of Shoreham.
Right. Well, that's great. And is that coming back? Is that making a recovery then?
It's. The odds are it's an expansion off its original area. The nearest locations we've got are kind of near a Bluebell Hill kind of area, but there is the potential that it might have been a release, but it does seem to be an establishment, but it certainly wasn't us that did it. But
okay, but you're happy to see it there in any case?
Very happy to see it there. It's fantastic. Just previous to that, we had first records of small blue on the site, which again were the first records for quite some time of that on the site. So yeah, we're gaining new species, which is fantastic news for the site.
So given the fact that Darwin was here, 150, 200 years ago, that he was recording and looking at all the stuff that was going on here, I presume that in itself is a really valuable record, that you've got kind of an accurate scientific look back through time at what you might expect to have found here in the 1830s, 1860s, and you can actually make a direct comparison to what you're getting today.
Yeah, so Darwin was an absolute meticulous record keeper, so we have fairly extensive lists of the species that he recorded on Orchids Bank, which is what he used to call the site. So we can actually directly compare those to the species lists and that we're still getting on the sites today. So, and as I said, the vast majority of species that he recorded are still here. So,
are there any that are missing that you're hoping to get back?
The real delight would be musk orchid. So the area just next to us is called Musk Orchid Bank, and musk orchid was recorded there during Darwin's time. No records of that species on the site for quite some time now. So that would be a real coup to get that one.
Right, okay. And do you hope it might be just somewhere lying in the soil waiting for the right moment, or is it just gone?
Always say never. So we were lucky enough a couple of years ago. We had our first greater butterfly orchid on the recorded on the site, and that was the first one in 30 years. So I mean that was a result in itself. So I always say never with anything, but it would be quite a long way for it to come now to make its own way.
Where are they generally at the moment then?
Further down the valley, I think is the nearest known location. So yeah, it'll be a bit of a way for them to come.
So Paul, we're just walking along and you've got excited looking at this. So I'm pointing at a little kind of purple flower. So that's some kind of a scabious, is it?
Yeah, so this one is small scabious, which is another one of our chalk grassland indicator plants. And literally, as I said, within a square metre, we've got oxeye daisy here, which is another one of our key indicator species. We've got yellow rattle here just by our feet. And over here we've got the rather fabulously named Squinancy-wort, which you've just got to love some of the names for these plants. And then just further over the back there we've got some eyebrights coming through and some fairy, also the lovely named fairy flax just at the back there. So,
and because all of these, they're tiny little flowers and they're very easy to walk by and not even notice them unless you've got a trained eye and you're looking at them and thinking, oh look, that's a rarity. It's easy to ignore the fact that they're there at all, but they're really important plants.
Some of them are literally blink and you miss it. I mean, these are some of the showier plants, but really, particularly with chalk grassland, it's used to that kind of fine cropped, low growing habitat. you really need to get right down, get in amongst it. And when you get down to that kind of level, you not only see the chalk grassland, you also smell the chalk grassland. We've got plants here like marjoram, we've got wild thyme. If you're sitting on the bank on a nice summer's day, you can literally smell the wildflowers.
Why is it important to keep this sort of variety of plants, which, you know, they're not big, they're not that showy, as you say. Some of the flowers are microscopically small. They're not plants that a gardener would, you know, put in their garden and go, look, I've got a magnificent display of, what was it? Sid and Nancy wort.
Squinancy wort, but yeah. Yeah, funnily enough, you're speaking to the wrong gardener, because I'm exactly the person that would be having this in my garden. It's important because of the habitat. So basically, chalk grassland is one of the rarest habitats that we have in Britain and Europe. We've got a good percentage of the chalk grassland habitat that we get in Kent for the UK. If we're not preserving this, as I said, it will very rapidly revert to kind of woodland, scrubland and woodland. So really, we are holding on some of the last vestiges of this really high quality chalk grassland habitat.
And is that a ringlet butterfly there, is it?
Formed. Yeah, it's a ringlet just flittering over the back there at the moment.
And again, you have to have this kind of habitat to get those kind of butterflies. And if you don't keep this preserved in the way it is, we lose those as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, some of the butterflies, particularly some of the rarity species, are tied to individual food plants. So without those, the butterflies will go the same way as the grassland species. So it's not just butterflies either. Lots of other insects really are tied to this kind of habitat, and without it, we'll lose those as well.
So we've walked along the bank just a little bit and found well, I don't want to be rude, but a sort of square of old sticks on the ground here. But this is actually a scientific experiment.
So this was back in 2008, I think it was. We set up a recreation of one of the experiments that Darwin did on his own lawn up at Downe House.
Mm-hmm.
And in essence, basically, he excluded an area of the lawn from grazing, so by rabbits and via for it being mown. And he studied it over a number of years, and the idea was to see what happened to that bit of land with the exclusion of management. And his theory was, and what proved to be right over the course of the 3 years that he was studying it, was that given the opportunity, woody species will become prevalent, and they'll start excluding some of the finer grassland species, and the woody species become dominant.
Okay.
And there's an experiment we recreated here, and we had Orpington Field Club at the time were coming out monthly, counting the number of species in it, and sure enough, plants like dogwood and hawthorn very rapidly took hold. And started to shade out some of the other species. So.
And as I say, it is just a pile of sticks on the ground now. It doesn't look like anything at all, does it? But it was like a little fence, I take it, to try and keep the rabbits and whatever out of the area.
It was just a little wooden hurdle. It's mainly just to demarcate the area, and then we actually put a ring of stock fence around it. Mm-hmm. So the site is grazed in the autumn as part of our routine management work. So the idea was to keep the grazing stock off of this little area, and then just let nature take its course. So. But
it does go to show that you really have got to manage this area quite intensively, effectively. Although it is it's wild but managed. If you just left it alone, give it 5 years, it would just be covered in trees.
Yeah, I mean the grazing stock we use on the site do an absolute fantastic job. We use our hardy sheep breeds. They do a fantastic job of taking a lot of the herbage off the site. They will, to a degree, they control some of the woody regrowth as well. But without the effort of myself and the team of regular volunteers that we have up here controlling that woody growth, as you said, give it 4 to 5 years and we would be under a stand of particularly dogwood on this site, probably about 4 foot tall. So,
but as we're looking around, I mean, there are dozens and dozens of little hazel trees. I can see a couple of silver birches that are coming through there. There's all sorts of other stuff that if you left it alone would just get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a combination of that grazing and then doing the follow-up control on it. We also have the advantage here, we do have herds of deer that rove through the area, so they'll be doing a bit of selective grazing for us as well, browsing of some of the woody material as well. So although a lot of the effort is from our own grazing stock, nature is playing its part as well. So
okay, so we've got Bromley literally just round the corner. There's an awful lot of housing. There's a lot of people with gardens who'll bring in all sorts of exotic stuff from the garden centre. Have you had anything turn up here that you thought, oh my God, I don't want to see that?
I think we're quite lucky here because we are in a little bit of a hidden valley. But what we have found on the site before is we've had some cowslips on the site that have kind of hybridised with people's back garden primulas. So those we have kind of selectively removed because we don't want those becoming dominant on the site. So other than that, sadly, as with a number of our other nature reserves, we do have a little bit of a problem here with fly tipping along the roadsides. And we are always on alert for species that people have dumped that might become invasive on the site as well.
So washing machines, you can deal with that, but it's when you've got like garden waste that people have dumped.
I'd rather not have the washing machines either, but there's species such as Japanese knotweed, and if you dump live cuttings of that, it can very rapidly take hold, and then you've got a couple of years' work to then try and eradicate them again. So really, early detection is the best thing. So we do regularly keep an eye on the site for things like that. So.
Because this bit of down here, I mean, it's tiny, really, isn't it? It's only a couple of 100 feet from side to side, and half a mile from end to end.
Yeah, it is. It really is a thin sliver of really high quality chalk grassland, but we are hedged in on both sides by quite mature woodland. So it wouldn't take a lot for the woodland to creep down, meet in the middle, and you would very rapidly, without the management work that we do, you would very rapidly lose really pristine quality chalk grassland areas like this.
But do you think, we've mentioned Darwin a couple of times, if he was to wander down here today, would he recognise it?
I would like to think, I mean, I like to feel it when I'm here that I'm literally walking in the footsteps of Darwin, and the path that we just walked along as well, we've just been walking in the footsteps of David Attenborough as well, a more recent visitor. So,
well, I have to say, from a personal perspective, walking literally in the footsteps of Charles Darwin and David Attenborough is as good an afternoon as you can spend, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a real highlight and a privilege to be able to come to sites like this. It's we're walking in the footsteps of the greats.
So, Paul, as we're stood here, and it nearly landed on you, it's now landed on some grass, a marbled white.
Yeah, so marble white's one of the species that we get on site in quite good numbers if you pick the right day. I mean, the whole site can be like a butterfly aviary. You can just be walking through, and if the butterflies are in the grass and sward, you can just be brushing them up, and literally you can be walking through a cloud of butterflies here on a good day. So, in fact, there's another one just down there now as well. So.
Well, the sun's, we just had a shower a moment ago, but the sun's thinking about coming out now. It's one of those really changeable days, isn't it? I guess they kind of take their moment as soon as the rain goes away. They're like, right, here we go.
Yeah, especially if you can just pitch that little bit of sunlight in between the things, you can really encourage them up and onto the wings. So dragonflies as well, we can get come through the site in quite good numbers as well. So, and again, very, very, very weather dependent. But
and how rare a species is a marbled white?
They're not uncommon on this site. We on the sites where you've got the right habitat and the right food plants and that they're relatively common. Well, or rather, you can get them in quite good numbers on the right site. So
what is their food stuff? What do they like?
A whole range. Well, there you go. It's just landed on a pyramidal orchid down there at the moment. So pity we didn't get a photograph of that one. So they'll take a whole range of different flora. So
like such as.
Or pyramidal orchids.
Yeah.
I quite regularly see them on the knapweeds and on the thistles as well. So we get carline and quite often see them feeding on black knapweed here. As I said, in quite good numbers. So.
And for domestic gardens, is it possible to kind of try and recreate this kind of downland area domestically? How big a patch do you need for it to work?
On a small scale, you can certainly do it. The thing that's really important here is the geology. So as you said, it's chalk downland, so the chalk is not 4 to 6 inches below our feet here. So that's the real difference here, is having that underlying geology. In your back garden, we've done it in our front garden, we've converted it to a wildflower meadow, really small scale, and it's just a case of bringing it back to bare earth, getting the right wildflower mix and just leaving it be, really. It's a fantastic way of low intensity gardening because I cut my front lawn once a year and that's all it takes to keep it. And at the moment it's looking not dissimilar to this, not the orchids sadly yet, but it's looking not dissimilar to this at the moment as far as some of the other butterfly species.
And what do the neighbours make of that?
We're lucky enough, we've won gold for the Wildlife for Gardening Awards 4 times, so we've got the plaques on display in the front garden just so people realise we haven't left it to just go wild. So, most of them are well on board. We're known as the wildlife family in our area, so it's not a bad label to have.
So you've suddenly stopped and dived into the undergrowth here. What have you found?
This is a little spot I know where we get a rather interesting plant called adder's tongue fern.
Okay.
So, and to most people, you walk straight past it and you wouldn't think twice about it because it's a bit green on green. But yeah, as the name suggests, if you look at the flowering, the sporing spike on it, it does look not that it's in an adder's tongue close up, but it's meant to resemble the tongue of an adder.
Right, and why is that? Why is adder's tongue? Is it just its rarity value? You don't get to see much of it?
It's a rarity. It's probably a massively under-recorded plant, but yeah, it is quite a rarity for this site. We probably get no more than about 150 flowering stems of it on the site. So it's really, you've got to be here at the right time of year to see it, because once the rest of the growth goes up, it is just a little green plant in a whole sea of green.
Is that another leaf of it down there?
There is that is very well spotted, I have to say. So yeah, there's another one just there.
This is the thing, isn't it? As we wander along this bank, every pace, if you stop and look, it's just a colossal density of different things, and it's very, very easy to not realise how many different things are going on.
Yeah, you've really, for the plants that we get on this type of habitat, you've really got to get down to their level. So that lawn experiment that we were looking at earlier, when Orpington Field Club were surveying it on a monthly basis, they recorded 39 species of flowering plant and 2 species of mosses, and that's within this 1 square metre of habitat. So that's the real diversity. There's this old kind of saying that chalk grassland really is the UK's equivalent of the tropical rainforest.
Uh-huh.
And it is that kind of species diversity you're talking about on a very small area. That's just the plants.
Uh-huh.
When you're talking about all the invertebrates, all the other species that are in there as well, it really is a very rare and very, very fragile habitat, and we really do need to conserve it.
And so when you talk about sort of 40 odd different flowering plants per square metre, have you totted up to see how many species in total there are along the total bank?
The species list for the site in total, I think, is somewhere in the region of 330.
Right.
So yeah, we do quite well for different plant species on the site. So.
And then once you add in the invertebrates and butterflies and birds on top of that, it runs into the thousands.
You're rapidly heading up into the thousands. So yeah.
And for you, I mean, what kind of a naturalist would you say you are? You've been here working on this site for quite some time, haven't you?
Yeah, I think I've had this one for about 18 years
18
now.
years,
so
okay.
yeah, on and off. So I score myself as a generalist naturalist. I think you have to be in this line of work because we try and manage for everything. So particularly plants are a particular passion of mine, particularly orchids, but butterflies, small mammals, reptiles. Yeah, I try and cover the bases. So.
So as I'm just a rank amateur in this. I like to come out and see it, but I don't generally know what I'm looking at. How do you get into figuring out the difference between one brown butterfly and another, one orchid and another? What's your process for doing that?
It's just practice and study, really. Like I said, it's very useful if you can do it on a day where they're staying still long enough to look at some of those key identifying features. That's a really big help. But yeah, study the guides, get to know them, and then a lot of it, I hate to say it, it's a bit of a bird term, but it will then come down to jizz. You'll be walking along, you'll see how they're flying, you'll see what they're doing, what plants they're going on, and then that can really be a big tell, and it really helps when you're doing those kind of walkover surveys because you get literally fleeting glances. So it really helps when you get it to that level. It's quite helpful.
And one of the things that I've started doing recently is using the smartphone, taking pictures of things and doing an online search. Is that a useful thing to do, or did that lead you up the garden path sometimes?
It's for enthusiastic amateurs. I say it's a great thing because to have that technology at the touch of your hand is an absolutely brilliant tool. The like the Merlin app for birds, I think, is an absolutely fantastic thing. But as you said, don't take everything it says as gospel. We've had some very random things come up where the volunteers have tried searching for it before now. It's don't use it, but don't take everything at face value.
So as we're stood here on the bank, talk me through some of the plants we can actually see. What are the ones that kind of get you excited when you see them coming up?
So what we're surrounded by here is quite a lot of our what we call our chalkgrass and indicator species. So we've got hairy St John's wort just over here. We've got common rock rose. Lots of salad burnet for the lower sections on here. If you have been here in the spring, this bank is an absolute carpet of primroses and cowslips. all the way across the bank here. We've got some of the indicator grasses. This one will be coming into flower a little bit later on in the season, so this is our black knapweed. And then there's rough hawkbit coming through this area here. Just wall to wall with just chocker with excellent flowers, really.
And how do you manage it? How do you keep this bank in the state that it's in? Do you mow it? Do you let a sheep on it from time to time? Do you just leave it alone? How do you keep it in this condition?
So the management regime for this site is we autumn graze it. So we have a flock of our hardy sheep, which are normally a flock of our Hebrideans, which are really great little sturdy browsers. They'll take the vast majority of the kind of herbage after it's set seed and finished flower and set seed. They'll also take a lot of the kind of woody growth, and then we follow up with volunteer teams kind of controlling the coarse woody material that they can't do, and just trying to stop species like clematis and wild privet and that just kind of creeping down onto the bank. So it's quite a lot of effort, but as you can see today, it's well worth the effort. So.
And you said, I mean, you've been coming down here on a almost daily basis for 18 years and you haven't got bored of it yet?
I don't think I'll ever get bored of it. I mean, there's not many places where literally, apart from one little pylon on the distance and the plains overhead, you could be anywhere right now, and it's an honour and a privilege to be able to be a bit of a guardian for places like this. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Many thanks to Paul Glanfield, the Nature Reserve Warden for the Sevenoaks area. And it really was such a pleasure to get the chance to walk through such a rich environment with someone who has such a depth of knowledge and a real love of what they do. And I now have the marvellous name Squinancy-wort added to the list of plants that I can now reliably misidentify. And what's really marvellous, of course, is that if you want to visit Downe Bank Nature Reserve yourself, you can, for free. Just make sure if you do go, tread lightly and respectfully on a piece of land that is truly special. Well, this has been a Wild Rover Media production for Kent Wildlife Trust. I'm Rob Smith, and until next time, do go wild in the country.